First of all, good afternoon to everyone. Well, hello. Welcome to day 2 of the Milken Institute Global Conference. Who was at the lunch plenary session just now that just ended? Wasn't that some kind of amazing?
Incredible.
So I'd be remiss to not talk about that lunch session for just a couple of seconds as we transition into our panel this afternoon, really focusing on, it's from marketer to influencer to global brand shaper. But when you really think about the world that we live in, punctuated by all of the kind of inspirational messages that we just saw, and it didn't stop at inspiration. It was information, inspiration. It gives you that kind of tug at the heartstrings moment, but the messages that each of the people you saw on stage quickly turned into an action item. And that right there is, I think, the heart of marketing. So this afternoon, I am delighted and privileged to be moderating this panel. I'm gonna do some brief introductions, and we're just gonna get right into it. I also want this to be as dynamic as can be. Again, marketing is all about consumer engagement. So we're gonna, at some point in the discussion, bring you in. So be ready with your questions, and let's get started. So to my right is Beth Brady. Beth is with us from Principal Financial Group. She's the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer. Right next to Beth is Matt Dorella. Matt is Vice President of US Sales at Twitter. You can find him at Dorella. It's Twitter, by the way. So how can you not?
Thanks for the plug.
There you go. To my left here is Hannah Grove. Hannah is Chief Marketing Officer of State Street. And all the way to the end, we have Mark Wilson. And he's got the best title of all of us.
Exactly.
We can't beat this. It's Chief Evangelist of BlackBerry.
Yes.
So let me just get started here with one question I want to pose to each of our panelists. As we talk about marketing and exactly what that means for each of your companies, what's incredible about this panel is that we come at it from very different vantage points. We have very different audiences and very different tactics. But at its core, I think some very kind of common themes are emerging. So let's start by thinking about, define your product, your audience, and one marketing and engagement strategy that's currently underway that you're really proud of. So let's start with you, Beth.
All right. So I work at Principal, and our product is really financial services across the board, investment services. And so that covers the gamut of insurance products to asset management to mutual funds, the whole range. And so that's our product. Our challenge is that financial services can be somewhat of an unwelcoming industry for consumers. And so what we're really working on doing, and I'm fairly new in this role, I started in September, and I came from packaged goods industry, which is very consumer-centric. So what we're working on doing is becoming friendlier to the consumer, becoming more interesting. And so we've got a lot of initiatives going. The one that I think I'm most excited about is this whole area of personalization. Is about taking all of the rich data that's out there and being able to take that information and tailor our messages to the audiences that we're dealing with, specific consumers, all the way down to the individual level. But more than that, all that data now allows us to find out when is the best time to engage them. What's the best time to engage someone that's a millennial versus somebody that's a boomer, somebody that is in a certain career field versus another career field. Do they like to be engaged via TV, or do they like to be engaged via digital? So that's an area that we are getting into, and I'm really excited about it, and there's a lot more to come, but I think it's the next generation of marketing.
Thanks, Beth. And I'm sure I'm curious about learning more exactly how that personalization's happening in a financial services firm. So Matt, your turn.
Great, thanks. It's a privilege to be up here. At Twitter, how many people, raise a hand, have been on Twitter or seen tweets today? All right, good. We're doing all right, probably about 60, 70%. Well, at Twitter, our job is to instantaneously connect people with what's most important to them in their world or the world. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of is that we have this wonderful business challenge. Like, we have hundreds of millions of people coming to our website every day. We have all this amazing content. And what we need to do is like really simplify and curate that content for people. And one of the areas most recently, over this past weekend, many of us were following what happened in Nepal with the earthquake. And Twitter, as a Twitter employee, some of the most proud moments are during these challenges, these crises that happen. And it was really a proud moment for my entire organization, for us. We got involved right away. Twitter has an amazing ability to help news organizations, trusted, verified accounts, disseminate information instantly to people so they know what's happening. We give NGOs and local agencies tools to connect with people, let them know where, whether relief is or even sometimes where people are. And it's been really great to see people use Twitter in interesting ways to actually, help people who are in the most extreme need possible. So that's one of the areas where I'm extremely proud.
Well, thank you. And we'd love to hear more about that as well. One of the news articles talked about how there was no water, no electricity in Nepal, but everyone was connected through social media networks. So terrific. Hannah.
Thank you, Cecilia. It's great to be here. I'm also very proud, apropos the lunch today, that this panel has got a good demographic gender balance. So.
Cheers.
Good indication there.
There you go.
So I'm representing the B2B end of the spectrum. State Street provides investment servicing, investment management, investment trading and research, data and analytics to institutional investors globally. So pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, asset owners, asset managers. I think overall, I think one of the biggest challenges that exist in the B2B space is that our client base is actually quite finite. There's probably 3,000 clients globally, clients and prospects. So it's about really being able to differentiate and also create content that's relevant. Very similar to Beth, what I'm most excited about, and I think you'll hear a lot on the panel today, is how the digital and the social world is enabling a much greater connectivity to the end client. And what that enables us to do is to map the overall client experience. So at State Street, we think about it in terms of gaining insights through social listening to what's relevant and what's important. Creating awareness through not talking about ourselves, because no one wants to hear a company just sort of recite their facts, but instead creating interesting dialogues. We're a major sponsor of TED. Our TED Talks have had more than 7 million views. Nurturing a relationship, I think marketing can simplify the overall client interface. And lastly, driving client advocacy and loyalty. So, Cecilia, we just finished an NPS pilot, which has been prevalent, I know, in the retail space, but less so in the B2B.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you. And Mark?
So I'm with BlackBerry, and I'd say, in terms of BlackBerry, a lot of people recognize BlackBerry in terms of the mobile device. We also have an enterprise software business. We have an Internet of Things business. So we run within 60 million cars. When you're driving around in your Audis, you're driving using BlackBerry technology. So we manage all of that, as well as in 20% of all medical devices. And the interesting thing that we've done at BlackBerry, it's really been a phenomenal last 18 months. And I joined about 14 months ago, just a huge transformation. It's the greatest opportunity as a marketer that you can have, and that we've been very focused historically on the consumer market. And so when I joined, I think Alicia Keys was our spokesperson, and we were focused on, how do you provide the best movie experience. You're watching, your favorite movie like a Frozen. Very much focused on that. We've made a sea change in terms of our strategy, and that's been to focus on mobile professionals as well as the mobile enterprise. And the thing that I'm most proud about that the BlackBerry team has done has really been to raise the conversation about security as it relates to mobile. It is amazing, and I actually didn't know when I joined, it is amazing how insecure all of our devices are and how we lead our lives. And I won't get into all the details of it, but I'll say that when we've seen people like Chancellor Merkel switch from a BlackBerry, switch from another device to a BlackBerry when she's being monitored, it's making sure that you're providing all of that. And it happens both in business, that we care about a professional and making sure that they have the most secure communication experience. If you're a politician, if you're a banker, if you work if you're a healthcare provider, we're focused on all of these areas in terms of really making it it's not a joking matter. Like, it's making security a really relevant matter. And so it's seeing when the companies like Anthem or Home Depot are getting hacked, what does it actually mean? Or seeing, I think it was this week, President Obama's email getting hacked, not on his BlackBerry. His email getting hacked. These are very, very serious situations, and even for us individually. So us individually, we may not be the President of the United States, but maybe we don't want our photos spread around the internet. Or perhaps, if you look at our medical records, a medical record on the black market is worth $500. A financial record is worth $5. You can see that people have a vested interest to go get your information. And if you look at, and we've done a lot of surveying on this, if you look at the most insecure platform or ways that the bad guys can get into healthcare providers, it's mobile. So mobile represents not only this great euphoria in terms of how we can all communicate and collaborate in ways we never thought possible, 15 years ago, but it also represents a significant threat. And that's where BlackBerry's focused. And I think, so I'm most proud of our ability to raise the consciousness of this issue.
So Mark, let me linger on that for a minute. Earlier today, when this panel met to prepare, we were all stuck with 60 million cars. We didn't know that BlackBerry was was pretty much powering 60 million cars. We don't know a lot of things about BlackBerry, but we know that its visibility is increasing. We know that it's a brand that we can relate to and have experiences with. Now, let's pull the curtain back a little bit. How do you make that happen from the back end? What does the team look like? It says that you lead a cross-functional team. What does that mean?
So one observation about BlackBerry, we are a Canadian company through and through. That means we are the modest group in the room,
The good beer.
And this is, the good beer, the good hockey, but we're the most modest group in the room. So a lot of people have come from Silicon Valley that have been part of this team that's looking at BlackBerry. And we are just amazed. And if you were at a Silicon Valley company and you had the 10th of the technology that BlackBerry has, you'd be on the mountaintop just screaming it out every day. But we have a culture that is a bit more humble, and I think it works very well in terms of security, in terms of that culture. So in terms of then what we do, we're all about secure communications. So whether that secure communication is somebody talking on a smartphone, whether that's secure communication in terms of communicating with your car or how your car operates, whether that communication is a medical device and actually seeing that communication come back and being able to analyze it if you're a physician, that's our sweet spot. We know more about secure communication than anybody. And what's interesting is if you look at things like the Internet of Things, that secure communication has many, many use cases. So certainly a terrific use case is the smartphone or a tablet, but there's many use cases that go into several different industries. So.
Well, thank you for that. Now I'm going to flip over here to Beth. Beth, as we talk about the evolving role of the Chief Marketing Officer and what it means from kind of internal strategies and how you prioritize business models, you had touched on something that's in play currently at Principal Financial Group. Let's expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think it used to be that marketing kind of sat in its own little world, and Hannah and I were kind of going back and forth on that earlier today. And come in and you would be the people that spent everyone's money, and really, but that's not really what marketing is about. I think we all know that it's about influencing. It is about things like getting ROIs and metrics. The thing that's happened is with the amount of data that's available now, with the amount of information, it's made this field a lot more technical than it ever was. It used to be quite a bit more subjective, and he's coming up with advertising, but it's become more technical. And one of the fastest growing positions in marketing is a marketing technologist, somebody that has a background in software, has maybe worked at an agency, has then gone and worked as a client, maybe gone back to some, working in the software side. And it's because there's so much availability out there in terms of what you can do with digital. So at Principal, we have realized that the marketing side and the technology side can't be separate. And so we are building a digital roadmap. How do we digitally enable our company, enable the things that are important? And there are three sort of buckets. One is transactions, one is communications, and the third one is analytics. So how do we enable that digital transformation? So we've been charged, myself and our Chief Technology Officer, Chief Information Officer have been charged to co-own the digital roadmap for Principal. And that's new. I was telling these guys earlier that when I first went on, before I was presenting to our board where we were going, I thought, well, let me go Google and see kind of what articles have been written about, you know, this partnership. And at least half of them showed, you know, two people arm wrestling, because that is kind of where it has been, as these two have been at odds. But we are actually partnering. We're partnering very, very well, and that partnership is absolutely. I can't do my job without the partnership, because it's going to be estimated that within the next 4 years, about over 50% of all technology will be marketing related in any company. And so that's where we're heading. At the same rate, our CIO can't do his job because he's about figuring out, well, what am I trying to solve? What problems am I trying to solve? And so for us to partner together to figure out what are the big, meaty things we want to do, what's at an enterprise level versus maybe at a business unit level, and how do we enable it so that we are not just thinking about what's there today, the data of today, but what's coming, and how do we prepare for that as well? So that is a unique situation. A lot of companies haven't yet built that partnership in, and I would encourage anybody that's, you know, kind of going on this journey that it's an incredibly important partnership, and if you don't have it, it's going to be really hard to get to the kinds of goals that you want to with digital enablement.
And I think that a common theme you're going to continue to hear from this panel is this cross-functional element of working across departments, across verticals, if you will. And I know that word sometimes in some corporate speak is totally banned, but you know, trying to really have that integration so that the consumer experience, because the consumers don't really care which departments.
That's exactly right.
Right, first. So Hannah, I wanted to talk to you about, like, so how do you create an infrastructure that allows you to map strategies against your customer's journey?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you're exactly right. The sort of term vertical, or this sort of compartmentalized approach. You know, when I first started in marketing, there was this sort of very much sense of these discrete disciplines that, you know, whether it was media or the creative or the employee communications, and they operated in quite compartmentalized modules. And then as the marketing organizations mature, you recognize that one of the major pitfalls that companies make overall is that they can face off to their client base like an org chart. And as you said exactly, Cecilia, they don't care. Ultimately, they're looking at solutions. And if that's the answer for the optimal client experience, then a marketing organization has to sit back and say, how are we organized to orchestrate that? And so at State Street, we've really blurred the lines within the marketing functions. So we have specialist teams that face off against client segment. There is no longer a discrete media engine, a discrete creative engine. We have those disciplines because you absolutely need to be able to mix the various skills together to deliver the solution. And like Beth said, I mean, the biggest growth for us is in the marketing technology and the digital space. But no longer is it compartmentalized because it's simply not the right answer.
Right.
It's much more of a horizontal offering.
Absolutely. And so at the end of the day, you know, a lot of the ways that we can actually have this seamless integration is data-driven. Yeah. So Matt, some recommendations, suggestions on how you've actually, how do you market a marketing company?
Right.
And how do you use data for a company that actually has tremendous amounts of data at your fingertips?
Yeah, it's really, just to build off everything that Hannah and Beth have said, you know, you don't want to show any seams. So like when we actually sit down with marketers like this esteemed panel, you know, we start with the insight from the consumer. Like we sit on Twitter on roughly 1 billion tweets every couple of days, and that gives off a tremendous amount of signal on what's on consumers' mind, and it's all public data. We acquired a company called GNIP, and what GNIP does is basically turn all that signal into simplified streams that marketers like this can use to solve specific business challenges. And that can lead to really interesting insights for targeting, for creative, and ultimately for measurement, a feedback loop on how things are going. A really sort of surprising example came out of the UK. There's probably not a lot of folks here who are in the French fryer business, I'm guessing. But they were, this big French fryer in the UK was using Twitter data to understand when people were tweeting soggy fries. And it was this signal that actually led them to go, and they would come with data to all these different franchisees and say, you have a French fry problem. And we actually have the data to prove it, and they would actually go in and actually either buy a new fryer or change out parts to upgrade it. Now that's like sort of a funny example, but a real business solution that we've also seen be applied to some of the largest beverage makers in the world, to supply chain management with some of the biggest tech operators in the world. And for us, it's really a great way to shift the conversation from more of a transactional relationship, which I think often was the relationship between marketers and media entities, to something that's like way deeper and way more interesting in terms of being able to drive the right KPIs. And if you actually look at Twitter,
and KPIs.
Yeah, that's yeah. So I mean, we'll start with sales. Offline sales, customer sales. Can be upper funnel like NPS or some kind of
key performance indicators.
Yeah.
Is that what you're
sorry. Am I using?
We're trying to broaden it.
You're using terminology.
Guilty. Apologies.
Well, we're also talking about 140 characters.
That's right. And I'm already over. So I'll just finish by saying, if you actually look at the how we judge success, so much of it is actually working backwards from those KPIs, and we've done a lot of work to ensure that our marketers, who I think are under intense pressure to actually show the value of what they're investing in, working with third parties like Nielsen, Millward Brown, or Datalogix to actually show and prove not only that it works, but why. Why did it work? So you can actually scale that and across your entire organization.
Cecilia, if I could just make a quick point, because I think there's a sort of common denominator as you listen to all of us. I think that there's a real fundamental shift happening within the realm of marketing and the CMOs organization today. And that is this sort of shift from the sort of classic nomenclature that Beth relayed around, here's the cost center, to actually, I think, ultimately a revenue center. And that's where I think the huge opportunity is. And it is powered by everything that Matt and Beth and Mark have described. But I think it's a complete pivot point to the way that the discipline has been viewed in the past.
So let's take a step back and think about the marketer's toolkit, right? So we have data. And we can talk about all the different analytical models, and we can delve into the metrics piece of the conversation in a little bit. But I want to figure out, how do we actually build the right team? It's human capital, ultimately, that determines what the right data to collect would be and how to integrate that across teams and how to make sure that we continue to iterate as we go. So what does your team structure look like, and how do you find the best and the brightest? Open.
Well, I'll start. So this is also an evolution in how the role has changed and marketing's changed. But at Principal, I actually have responsibility for all the marketing side, but I also have responsibility for all the research and analytics side. So I have both pieces underneath me. And really that is really powerful, because it's that information and those insights that then fuel the programs that we run, that get to that, what I talked about earlier, personalization, or even on the back end measurement. So we do a program, then how do we go back in and say, did it achieve what we wanted to? So my organization is built off of a lot of different skill sets. I talked about this marketing technologist, which is a kind of a new role, and there will be more and more of those. On the analytics side, it's modelers, it's mathematicians, it's statisticians, it's people like that have the ability to really work with huge data sets be able to figure out and problem solve with those data sets, to be able to get us to better decision making. They feed that to my marketing team. Marketing's become extremely technology driven, so a lot of people on my team have experience, you know, with software, they're with digital, but I also have a whole creative group. And we were talking earlier, the one skill set that I think is so important, I really struggle to find, is writers. Really good writers, because at the end of the day, what we do is communicate. And the hardest thing to do right now, and particularly in financial services, we have this great ability to overcomplicate everything. If we can make it harder, we will. And my one, I say to people all the time, I'm like, don't tell me everything you know. Tell me what I need to know. And that's communication, and the ability so writers, journalists, people that have that skill set are really in high demand, and there just not as many of them out there anymore. I mean, I think the schools are focusing a lot more on the technology side. So, boy, if you have any kids that are looking to figure out what to do, I just send them to journalism school, because that, I think, is a really important skill set that's tough to find. So that's kind of the breakout of my team and the skill sets that they have.
I would say one observation I have is marketing is such a great job in that there's an aspect of creative destruction that you get to really focus on that many other disciplines like finance or HR don't. So what I mean by that is whatever program you ran 2 years ago, if it didn't work, whatever you do, don't do that program. And then if whatever program you ran 2 years ago, if it worked, don't do that program, because now everybody's doing that program. So you constantly have to figure out how to blow up what you did before and come up with something new. And so you need an organization that is like that. So one thing that I think is interesting is we within marketing see what this global phenomena is in terms of human capital, and that is. I tell my daughter this all the time. I say, whatever you do in your career, you can do whatever you want. Just try not to pick a job where you can be replaced by a computer. And I say that because I find that a lot of times our job is to figure out how do you squeeze cost out of something and basically take the labor and, I don't want to say this in a Machiavellian way, take the labor and basically, you know, how do you automate more things so that you can put your human capital on smarter, more intelligent things? So I think that there's a change in terms of the creative destruction that happens within marketing. I think there's a change in terms of how do you automate more kind of route jobs. And then I think that the key thing, and it's what I hire for, is how do you find people that have critical thinking skills? Incredibly hard to find people that can think critically about a topic in a deep, sophisticated way. And I think that if you can find those people, it goes right into the jobs that Beth's talking about. That's where you're going to get your data scientists. That's where you're going to get your journalists that can really drill into an issue. And if you can find those people, I think that's the team that begins to evolve and makes marketing more of a leading best practice than a group that comes up with taglines or something like that.
Yeah, I just sort of building on that, I think, you know, fundamentally people want to connect with people. They don't want to connect with a sort of megalithic brand. And I think there's sort of something fascinating. I sort of regale my daughter with this analogy and her eyes roll into the back of her head, so bear with me. But I think that we've taken this real sort of pivot. So, you know, 100 years ago, the way that you engaged, you might have bought a product or favored something was entirely word of mouth and recommendations. And then I think we saw this rise of the mega brand and the major campaigns and a lot of sophistication behind that, but ultimately this sort of depersonalization. And now through social business, it's completely turning the other way. But it is, I mean, when we think in my personal life, how I choose a hotel or choose a restaurant or get a recommendation, it's entirely based on crowdsourcing. And so when we apply that to the talent at State Street, to answer your question, Cecilia, it's about people who are, as Beth said, communicators. So that's huge. I couldn't agree more. We're an industry that's managed to completely wrap ourselves in sort of obtuse terms. I was joking with the panel earlier that one of the things I've done in my group is ban the word robust. Because who says that, really? And just having a simpler, more straightforward voice, because that's how people want to be spoken to. So people who are innovators, big thinkers, not afraid to fail. We fail a lot, I couldn't agree more, but it's move on because you learn.
That's terrific. I love the idea of we fail a lot and we just have to keep going. But the other thing that, Mark, you pointed out too is that even when you're successful, you still have to move on. It's that ability to iterate and to use the data at your fingertips to be able to then take it to the next level. And sometimes the next level could also be corporate speak. So we just said we were going to challenge ourselves to stop touching bases and stop circling back and all these, phrases that we kind of tend to go back to. And so Matt, how does Twitter find the best and the brightest?
So it's interesting. A lot has changed over the last 3 years. As I actually hear the perspectives of the panel, the way we actually design our teams and how we hire reflects a lot of the challenges that our customers face. So one of the things I hear a lot is how complicated it is. There's just more and more responsibility going underneath the CMO, and there's more and more challenges. So what we've uncovered is actually you need industry experts to take all that complexity and simplify it. So our teams are often built with industry experts from the financial services category or the technology, literally plucked from the industry, having worked and hopefully can empathize with exactly the kind of challenges the CMOs have. And that's how we built our team. And in fact, we're probably light on, relative to the 10 years ago, 20 years ago on pure salespeople. We actually have very heavy in the research area and analytics side. We have we call them brand strategists, which are this interesting combination of right-brain people, coders, designers, creative people that can frankly help our marketers be successful on our platform. So really the profile of the person needs to be a classic salesperson or representative. It's totally different now. It's much more of a general manager mindset with very specific domain expertise that hopefully can really empathize and understand the specific challenges and simplify them for the CMOs.
And you touched on something really interesting, the manager aspect, because really at the end of the day, it's not just coming up with the brilliant ideas, but it's managing that. It's not just the strategy, it's also the execution.
That's right.
And for marketing teams, sometimes we can kind of spend a lot of time in brainstorming and ideation ceremonies. But then at the end of the day, it's in the execution. It's in that ability to take it from inside the boardroom to really influence the actions of your customers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And at the risk of overstating the obvious, it has to be inextricably linked to the business strategy, to the revenue goals, to the overall strategic objectives of the company. And any gap will only undermine the efficacy of a marketing organization. So for us at State Street, I think we gauge our success in marketing based on our sales colleagues' ability to activate and implement the sort of surround sound that we create, because otherwise it's completely redundant. So ensuring that you have those sort of interlocking pieces are essential.
So let's, we just said in a number of different ways here that we're not, marketing is definitely a business priority. It's not just a cost driver. Now we need the kind of the data points to really make that case. What are some of the metrics that you use to not just make that case, but really to demonstrate the value of marketing?
So you know what, maybe I'll pull up the chart I brought. Slide 2, please. Slide 2. So I brought this along because we're doing some work with MIT right now, and to answer the question about what makes companies successful. And it's this intersection between analytics and data and how you leverage it and where you leverage it. So if you see on the one axis is companies, how engaged they are with their consumers, right? Their end users. And you can go to market through a lot of ways, through intermediaries, but at the end of the day, almost everything we do is consumed by somebody, an end user. And so, and then on the bottom is your business design, which allows you to leverage data, leverage information, have a system in place that you can analyze and make better decision making. And so the gist of it is the 4 quadrants are broken out. And one's on, you always want to be in the upper right. In every quadrant I've ever looked at, that's where you want to be, and this is no different. Which is, they call this open ecosystem. And if you think about this, this would be like an Amazon, which has a tremendous amount of capability, technological capability, digitally enabled. Other companies attach themselves to them, whether they be other retailers or suppliers or services, and they are extremely focused on their consumer. So anybody who uses Amazon for their books, for Kindle, knows that if you buy certain books, all of a sudden you're getting recommendations, and they do that. If you buy a coffee maker, the next thing you know, they send you a recommendation for coffee filters.
They know what you need before you need it.
Because they do, and they're like the one we hold up at the top. Over to the left of that, or I guess this omni-channel, these are companies that are really consumer oriented, but they may not have the digital ecosystem in place to help enable them. So they're a lot of the world I came out of, packaged goods, would fit into that world. On the modular producers, well, this is like your PayPals. These are companies that can attach themselves to other companies. They have a very strong ecosystem, business, digital ecosystem, but they're not necessarily focused on the end user. They're attaching themselves to someone else. And then at the bottom is this supplier. And this is, and by the way, the MIT's done all the work, and if you are up and to the right, your margins are the best, your performance is the best. But the supplier is a lot of the world that financial services lives in, so agent-delivered worlds. So one of the things that we are doing is saying, we have to figure out, number one, how to build this ecosystem and make it more effective for us, and we have to be more consumer engaged. We have to understand. So we're putting in a lot of measurement around how do we measure consumer. We love Twitter. We love the fact that there are companies out there that can take that unstructured data now, and they can codify it so that we can use it and we can figure out, well, what are the big trends out of Twitter? And so that's the kind of measurement. And the thing about it is, it used to be you would do something and you would go do a test, and 6 months later you'd have the results, and then you would go make it, and it would be a year before you could actually make any sort of change. Now, with Twitter, with some of the services out there, it's instantaneous. You can immediately measure what's happening, and you can quickly make an adjustment. So a lot of that, and then I would say the final thing that we are really focused on, and the industry is focused on, is ROI type measures. What is the return on the investment? How do we connect a transaction with an activity that we've done so that we can say these two are connected, and the return on that cost of activity was X. So it's become way more analytic than it ever was, and it's become quite a bit more complex than it ever was.
And so just to push into that a little bit more and to drill down a little deeper, what tools do you use, like as far as analytics, and if it's proprietary, by no means am I trying to pry here, but like
we
want it to be as tangible.
Marketing mix modeling, for example, marketing mix modeling. There's a new technique out there called multi-touch attribution modeling, which basically says, and it's for online kinds of activities. So it literally goes down to the individual level, and you collect all the data on, what you're doing, and every touch point, and it's put through regression models and modeled and said, well, this is the journey that took you to the transaction, as opposed to, did this thing happen? Well, we all know that when we make a decision on anything, there's a lot of things feeding into it. Multi-touch attribution modeling, for example, is designed to say, how do we capture all those touch points? And then how do we weight them and determine which ones made the biggest difference, or which combinations of ones made the biggest difference? So that's an example.
And just to build on that point, I want to make sure for the audience, for those marketing practitioners and not, know that this whole point is around digitization, which is the broad theme, that is one of the broad themes of this conference. And the nuance from a marketer in terms of digitization is we look at it as the digitization of human culture. So every aspect of human culture has become digitized. So for us, this is where I started my career. This will be where I end my career. It's a broad, 30-year trend, but it's what everybody is now focused on in marketing. Is if you can, as you digitize human culture, as everybody reveals their preferences in a digital way, you can mine that data in ways that you never thought possible to do. Multi-touch attribution. We weren't talking about this, 5 or 10 years ago, but now it's available to us, and you're seeing then it means it changes the organization and everything else. So I think that it's an important point because it's a broad trend that all marketers are seeing. And I'll only throw one cautionary note into that, which is the only cautionary note is in some ways I think we're on some of the forefronts of digitization, and that we do look at culture. There's a cautionary note when you see that there's a recent study from Stanford that within you liking things 10 times on Facebook, Facebook can be more accurate in predicting your personality or describing your personality than your colleagues at work. When you predict 100 things on Facebook, Facebook is actually more accurate at predicting your personality and understanding your personality than your family, than your friends and family. If you like 300 things on Facebook, Facebook is more accurate in predicting your personality than your spouse. These machines are actually quite amazing in terms of what it is. And as marketers, this is why all of this money, as we talked about, is feeding into marketing. The only other cautionary note I'll say is if you look at online dating services, the Pew Charitable Trust says 5% of people who are married come together because they dated online. eHarmony, check the source, says it's 30%. So between 5 and 30% of marriages are coming together through these online dating services. So when you think of that, the implication is, and if that trend continues, the gene pool that we're defining in the United States and the world is being defined by algorithms. Okay, that's a little odd, to kind of go through. So I think that there's a lot to this digitization, which is fantastic. But I do think, we want to be careful in terms of how far this goes.
Because at the end of the day, it is a personal experience that you're trying to be a part of. And so, Hannah, for you, you're a B2B company.
Yes.
How do you translate all of this to State Street?
Yeah, it's fascinating because, on the one hand, on the metrics discussion, because I completely agree with the comments, but I think it's a shift from output, so sort of how we measure sort of discrete campaign activity, to much more of a shift to the outcomes that sort of Beth and Mark and Matt outlined. I think for B2B, it's always about putting that personal face on a company that's really critical, and also doing so in a sort of very unexpected way. And for us, our sponsorship of TED was a sort of at the sort of leading edge of that, because it was saying, we don't have to talk about ourselves or what our ideas are. We want to be a broker of ideas. We want to be in the discussion. We want to be thought-provoking. And I think if it's okay, I could take 2 minutes to show you a really quick video to give you a sense of what that looks like. More than 7 million views, as I said, of our talks on TED.com, which is unexpected. So if we could have the video, please.
13 of our colleagues are about to give the talks of their lives. There will be new faces, new ideas, and new inspiration. And that's why we're here.
I had deliverables, baselines, I was touching base, and soon I was synergizing, monetizing. I didn't learn things, I had learnings. Jargon serves absolutely no purpose whatsoever.
The quality of our conversations influences the quality of our decisions, and the quality of our decisions dictates the quality of our outcomes. It is truly no exaggeration to say that World War III was averted because President Kennedy had learned how to create better conversation among his staff.
Clearly there are differences between how Gen X and millennials think, but I have seen how both can learn from one another. I believe that it is crucial for companies to create environments that are collaborative and inclusive. So all of us are encouraged to bring more of our hearts and our minds to the workplace.
My plea to you is this: don't grow out of your imagination. The world is complicated. The pace of change is just scary. The imagination multiplies our options.
If the rates of return on these development causes are so high, why are they chronically underfunded? Economic growth isn't an end in itself. We care about healthier lives and better lives.
I'm here to tell you why what happens in prisons should matter to all of us, and why I'm proud to be a prisoner by choice. Imagine if your life was defined by the thing that you're most ashamed of. If we can't forgive others, how can we expect to be forgiven ourselves? Because all of us do good and bad.
Hiding is a progressive habit. And once you start hiding, it becomes harder and harder to step forward and speak out. What I didn't realize until all these years later is that the biggest obstacles I will ever have to overcome are my own fears and insecurities.
I believe that words hold power. I've spent most of my life trying to fit in. Now I'm realizing maybe I was made to stand out. For me, success is being happy being you. So find a way of being you and being happy. Not the you feel you need to be, the you know you are. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are incredible.
13 of my colleagues. Very proud.
That was very nice. Fantastic. Now, Matt, let me turn to you. When we're talking about, how do you actually measure return on investment, how do you take a lot of the tug at your heartstrings, how you shape hearts and minds, like that video we just saw. And a lot of times we default to looking at the Twitter analytics and saying, okay, let's check those boxes. So how do you at Twitter actually measure your impact?
Yeah, this is like our favorite subject because we know that it's on the marketer's mind. So we partner up with companies, like I mentioned earlier, like Nielsen, Millward Brown. We work with Axiom or Datalogics. And I'll give you an example. For Anheuser-Busch just had earlier in the year an incredible campaign about responsible drinking. It was called #FriendsAreWaiting. And it was this really tug at your heartstrings video about a guy with his dog. He goes out, to obviously go out to a party, and it's not clear he's coming back. It's a beautiful video. And on Twitter, they used that to actually connect with people when they were actually tweeting about things like happy hour, when they were tweeting things about like going out for a drink or date night. So they connected this really emotional story with a moment that matters for the consumer. And what's great about the platform, these digital platforms, is that you're actually able to measure this stuff and understand like what is the impact. So sticking with the theme, like Anheuser-Busch also did another campaign around the Super Bowl where we use Datalogics, which is a third party that takes shopper data and will literally separate a cohort of A who is exposed or engaged with the ad and a cohort B that wasn't, and you can actually see like what happened. Did an engagement or an impression actually drive sales? Of those sales, which were lapsed buyers, which were new buyers, and you can get really deep on exactly what's working, and then understand to make decisions about what the value of the campaign was. I mean, for this particular campaign, again with Datalogics, Bud Light found that they got $6 return on ad spend for every dollar they put into Twitter, which is phenomenal by any standard. And for a CMO who's trying to grow the budget and turn into an operational expense that continues to drive growth for the company, it's a really powerful story.
Phenomenal. So let me open it up to the audience here. I don't know how many of our audiences are actually in the marketing space and those who really want to understand this space. So let's take a pulse here. Whose day job is it to do marketing?
Very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, that's really interesting to us here as well. So any questions? Let's see the gentleman in front. If you can hold on for a second, we want to put.
Hi, Fahad Khan. I'm the chairman of One Public and CEO of TubeCentrics. We're one of the largest marketing technology companies, the largest partners with Facebook, but I'm good friends with Adam Bain as well. Quick question is to the marketers, how do you deal with the agencies? Because we work a lot with brands and a lot with agencies. A lot of the pain comes with working through agencies, and a lot of your money is locked up with agencies that we do find very often in the CPG business, not in financial services, but CPG business, where actually agencies have more power than the marketer or the CMO.
So I can jump in and start on that because I've worked with pretty much every major agency out there over the years, and we were just having a conversation. I'm about to go meet with my current agency, who's all in LA, Trite. So I've always felt that every agency has the ability to do great work, and it comes though from great direction. And so the role as a marketer, my role is not to do their job for them. My role is to set those guardrails and to set very good strategy, to tell them what it is I want to achieve. You know, have a very good brand strategy, and good brand strategy comes from being, you know, trying to stand for something, not everything, to be clear on what you are and what you aren't. To simplification, we talked about that, but to lay all that out and then tell the agency what it is you want to achieve and let them do their job. And so one of the things I've always said is the greatest work out there comes from, usually comes from letting the agency do their job. And I always feel like, and I still believe this today, and I'm sure these guys will attest to the same thing, is some of the best work in my career that I've done with my agency is the work I'm most uncomfortable with when they present it. Yes. They put it in front of me, and I look and I go, there is no way this is going to ever get accepted. And I've had campaigns that, I don't know if many of you know, Progresso Soup was a business I ran for years, and there was this campaign that was a phone, that was a can that hung down. Well, when I had to go present that to the CEO that we were going to take and have people talking to a can and say, ring, ring, like they were calling someone, they looked at me like I had two heads. The reality is that was one of the top campaigns the company ever ran. The ROI on it was well over $3 when we figured out what we spent and what we got for it, but it made us all uncomfortable. But the agency really knew that they were going to tap into something that was all about the brand, while at the same time was something that was engaging and fun and interesting to consumers. And so, you know, I think the answer is, as a marketer, as someone in the company, I have to be really good about laying out strategy and guardrails, and then be equally good about backing off and letting the agency do its job, because that's where magic happens.
Question over here. Oh, one mic over here, and then we'll come to you.
Well, thank you so much for a fascinating conversation. I build content platforms and communities around them, and a lot of what we've noticed at the intersection of brands and content is not necessarily what one would call content marketing, but these sort of trends and drivers of how users, consumers bond, constituents bond over a specific topic, and driven by certain trends like info lust, despite shrinking attention spans, and so on and so forth. But what I'm curious about from your perspective is, so much of that is also driven by the brand's need to become a provider, an actor, a positive force for good. I was really impressed how State Street did that, but I would not have thought of that coming from a financial services space. So just curious, how do you square that, and what do you feel you have to be, in a sense, when you market yourselves?
I think the most important thing for me and for State Street is to be relevant, and that drives the preponderance of our content decisions. Because ultimately, I mean, you know, if you think of something like TED at its widest end of the funnel, we're then bringing that down to discrete, curated playlists that we can send to our clients each month on topics like risk or securitization or something that is very germane to a problem that they're having to solve for. But I think often in the realm of a content strategy, you almost get overwhelmed with wanting to tell everybody everything that you know, and instead you really have to sit back and say what is relevant, what is the context, and what is going to make most sense, and that prioritization is absolutely critical.
Absolutely.
Hi, this is Mark Goulston. I contribute to Harvard Business and Huffington Post and a bunch of other venues, and I wrote a book which became the top book on listening in the world. And this might be for Beth, who's kind of a hybrid of old marketing and new data-driven marketing. There's a term, experience near language and experience distant language. I think when we watched the TED thing, you saw experience near language, meaning you could lean into it, whereas experience distant language is kind of jargony and like KPIs when a quarter of the room didn't know what that was. So any thoughts on how you get the kind of TED experience into the data people that you have to collaborate with and get to work together and not, function as stovepipes in terms of their mental mindset. So Beth or anybody else to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question, and I think it's a challenge. And I think Hannah said it earlier, where it used to be sort of siloed in companies and all of the different disciplines where it had their own world. That doesn't work anymore, and so just as in my company, we are putting together the technology side with the marketing side. The other thing we're doing is we're putting the communicators and we're embedding them in all parts of the company. And, financial services as an industry is complex. There's a lot of regulation. There's compliance that you have to abide by. So there is. I think we have more lawyers at Principal than we have anything else. But the fact is that there's a reason for that. But that doesn't mean that you can't find a way to simplify your messages. And that's where communication really comes into play. And the thing that I tell people all the time is, and this is why I laugh about the jargon thing, is tell me what it is you want to do and explain it like you're telling your grandmother. Right? If you had to go and tell your grandmother about this topic, figure out how you would tell her, and then come back, and that's how you should communicate it. And because the reality is, and there's tremendous amount of facts about how much consumers are being inundated with information and how quickly, my favorite is there's a fact out there that says that a person has a 7-second attention span, and a goldfish has an 8-second attention. So I mean, you have to find a way to make what you're doing compelling, but it all does begin and end with communication, and it's in all areas. It can't be one group is responsible for simplified communication and everybody else gets off. And so we're working to embed that in more of what we do, but it's tough. It's a challenge, and especially in industries like ours that are, are highly regulated, and there's a lot of complexity.
I have a very simple solution as well, if I may, and that is that I think we should put a global ban on PowerPoint. Because can we get some? Because I think it's antithetical to exactly what Beth said. I think if we told better stories and we're able to engage, I think that campaigns would be successful exponentially. So
and to that point, I just add one thing, Tana. One of the things we do is now every presentation that we are working on giving, we ask people, don't give me all your charts and tell me your story. What is your story? Write your story, and then let's see what visuals. How do we bring the story to life? That's how it should happen. But it's a change from even how I grew up.
Exactly. It's a little tricky. And one thing to note, too, as marketers and as communicators, we tend to say, let me dumb it down for you. But really, I'm trying to be very conscious about that because we're not dumbing it down. We're making it relevant. Yes. So there's a very slight nuance there. But, when we need to be simpler is smarter. And you've heard simplify said so many times. Of all the words that we've used, if we're trending it, it would be #simple. So I think that would be something that I think we need to start to really, really consider. I think we have time for one more question, and we'll do a quick lightning round here. I think there's one over here.
Hi, Nina Savari here. I'm not in marketing, but I am a consumer, and I'm wondering, from a consumer perspective, how do you take into account user privacy and security in this world of big data? And I know, Mark, you touched on that a little bit in the beginning, but I was wondering, is there anything you do to portray that we're not just one big algorithm, and that there is some sort of user privacy that exists somewhere in marketing?
Well, what's great is so working at BlackBerry, we process all of the messages. We have access to so much data that we could mine. And as a marketer, if you even go near the rooms where that data resides, you're going to get fired. Like BlackBerry, it's so in our DNA that you can't go near that data. So we'll look to Twitter and we'll look to other sources to mine data, but probably the best data that all the marketers are salivating for, you simply can't touch it. And I think that's just good business practice in terms of making sure that you're protecting people's privacy. So I think that there's things that you can do as marketers to make sure that you're not violating people's privacies.
You know, on that note, I think it's a matter of trust as well to build on it. And let me use that as our last question. How are you building the trust among your consumer base so that you are able to then be relevant, deliver the messages that you need to deliver, and make the ROI case? Matt, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I started by talking about like what we do, and it is all about connecting people with what matters to them instantly. And the better we do that, the better content that we deliver to our users. Everything we do, everything we make, every acquisition that we're looking at is all in service of that mission. So that's where we're 100% focused, and it's very clear what we need to do to own our competitive advantage in the mobile and communication space.
Terrific, thank you. Hannah.
Well, I completely agree with the tenets that Mark said, and the only thing that I would add to that is at State Street, we also view our 30,000 employees as the absolutely ambassadors of that trust equation. So ensuring that they understand our value proposition, our strategy, and are sort of fully engaged in what we stand for as a company, and I think that's absolutely essential for us.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I would agree with everything. I mean, we go by the premise that your culture is your brand.
That's exactly.
And so whatever the values of your culture are, to live those every day in everything you do, but also to make sure that every single person in our company is, that's my biggest marketing force, that's my biggest advertising budget, is all those people that connect every day. And so making sure that we are absolutely living our values in everything we do.
That's fantastic. And Mark?
It's the same thing. I mean, exactly. For BlackBerry, we're all about security and privacy. If we violate that in any way, that you're irreparably harming the brand. And so it bakes it into the culture.
So to sum up this past hour, it was such an incredible learning experience. And I think to sum it up, let me start with one, you have to build that trust, and it starts at home. You have to practice what you preach. Two, I heard back, that really marketing has to be an integrated business strategy. It's not an output or an outcome. It is part and core of whatever drives that business model. Number three, it's human capital. We need to have the best and the brightest, and we need to make sure that we find that in very creative ways. I love the idea of we're looking for creative disruptors. Number three, it's communications across the company. It was so critical, and we heard that as we were talking about ROI and tools, but ultimately it circles right back to it's all about the personal experience. We have to map out each of our strategies, no matter what the business model is, from business to BlackBerry to Twitter to a financial services firm. The marketing core tenets are the same. And I think with that, thank you so much for joining us. My name's Cecilia Aradaza. I realized I didn't even introduce myself, and I'm with the Milken Institute. Thank you for coming.